Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Matt Pressman, who is an Alexander Technique teacher in Delray Beach, Florida. He has has a condition called spondylitis,
Correct.
and we're going to talk a little bit today about his experience with the Alexander technique, how it helped him with basically coping with that disease. I should say also that Matt is a health and fitness enthusiast. He has certification from the American Council on Exercise and the American Institute of Fitness Educators.
Yep.
And in college, he was the captain of the tennis team at UConn, University of Connecticut.
That's right.
Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Robert.
I wonder if you could first of all give our listeners a very short description of the Alexander technique.
Well, Robert, I'm a big fan of your show, and I think the quickest and easiest description for the Alexander technique is the study of body mechanics.
Hmm. And
And
how to use the mechanics you have efficiently. Can we add that to it?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a very basic definition. It's basically saying that whatever your situation is, how can you do the best with it? Would that also be a reasonable thing to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's looking at posture, alignment, movement, and reflex habits, and specifically looking at releasing muscular tension in the body.
Okay, now obviously you have this condition called spondylitis, and maybe it would be good. There may be some listeners who are not totally clear what that is. Maybe if you could start by just giving a very short description of that as well.
Well, it's really in essence, again, to keep it short, it's fusion in the vertebrae. So folks that have spondylitis have fusion in their vertebrae and lose movement and range of motion in their spine. So basically what you're looking at is a situation where it's been called before bamboo spine,
Hmm.
and you really lose your use of your spine in kind of everyday activity. So it's a pretty debilitating condition.
So you lose the basic flexibility of the spine, right?
Yeah, people become very stooped over, and a serious kyphosis, kind of a dowager's hump, can develop early in life. And so it's a scary thing to be diagnosed with. And I got diagnosed at 30 years old.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So going back to your definition of the Alexander technique, um, there's nothing in that definition that suggests a cure for a disease.
correct.
But on the other hand, whatever your situation is, it can help you do things more easily, more efficiently. And I think it would probably help our listeners, especially those who have spondylitis, to hear a little bit about how the technique helped you. Can I start by asking, did that diagnosis come before you decided to become an Alexander teacher?
Yeah, I'm 40 now. I was diagnosed at 30, and I couldn't find anything that worked, Robert. It was a very difficult situation. I was given sulfazidine, methotrexate, Vioxx. I don't know if you remember that prescription that was
That
pretty
was not a
widely
good
used at
one,
the
right?
time.
Yeah,
No, no.
yeah, yeah.
It was a COX-2 inhibitor, and it
Right.
gave people heart attacks. They found that afterwards. So I was taking that and a range of other medication to try to solve this problem. Got deeper into fitness, tried massage, tried yoga, tried Tai Chi, tried acupuncture, tried chiropractic, tried everything, and nothing was making it better. I had read about the Alexander technique on a post on the spondylitis website, called a teacher, and then tried it about a year later. So it actually was something I tried a long time after I originally investigated it, and it was excellent. I got really great results right away.
Hmm.
Um, and so it was really I mean, I wouldn't call it a cure for me necessarily, but it was a way to use my body more efficiently that allowed me to get out of pain much more effectively, efficiently, and easily than I had with anything else that I'd tried beforehand.
And apart from the pain issue, did it help uh, your physical functioning?
Absolutely. I mean, at the time, I was having a lot of trouble, everything from working out to just reaching to turning around to look, in the rearview mirror of my car. There was cervical spine problems, thoracic spine problems, lumbar problems. Basically, the spine had gotten into a condition where there was very limited range of movement. And any kind of jerky movements or fast movements or deeper kind of stretching types of movements would be extremely difficult to execute. So in the process of learning the Alexander technique, my movement got much more fluid and easy, and I learned how to use my body without body armoring, without kind
Hmm.
of adding muscular tension to my movements. And suddenly my range of motion increased by a huge amount. And not only that, but when I moved or when I stretched or when I went through everyday movements, I found ways to do it where I wouldn't increase or sharpen the pain that I had. That was at the beginning of the work with the Alexander technique. By about 20 lessons in, I began to see a sharp decrease in my chronic pain that I dealt with every day. So it was really something that I found was a self-care method that allowed me, as a pretty extreme back pain sufferer, to be able to cope with the pain by using my body in a different way.
So, am I correct in assuming that the degree of fusion hasn't itself changed any, or has it?
Well, what happened was, it's an interesting thing, and folks that are listening that have spondylitis are familiar with this. There's a blood antigen, HLA-B27, which is typically found in people that have spondylitis. That combined with a number of other things, your SI2 joints under X-rays show some fusion and inflammation. Oftentimes, people with spondylitis also get iritis, which is inflammation in the eye, where it hurts to look at sunlight, and also have back pain and chronic back pain. So after being misdiagnosed by a number of different doctors, I was sent to a rheumatologist who ran up a bunch of these tests on me and found out that I indeed did have spondylitis. And so I had then tried prescription medication to try to calm the condition as much as possible. And I tried, working out and living a more healthy lifestyle, eating better. I mean, everything under the sun I tried
Hmm.
to see if I could alleviate this condition. And what the Alexander technique did that was very different than everything else was it taught me essentially how to function differently and how to use my body in a much more efficient and effective way so that I wouldn't exacerbate pain. And this is what I was saying in the beginning. And then what happened was over a period of about 20 lessons, it started to really decrease my chronic pain that I felt on a daily basis, particularly when I woke up at night, or in the morning with a stiff neck, or just kind of at the end of the day, my back was kind of hurting and sometimes would go into spasm. It was really a wonderful treatment, let's say, for what I was undergoing with this condition.
Right. And the reason I asked about whether the level of fusion has changed, it sounds from what you're saying is that there were kind of two related things going on. There was the whatever the illness caused in terms of limiting motion of your spine, but then it sounds like there was also your reaction to that.
Yeah,
You mentioned armoring, um, kind of a Reichian term, I guess.
yeah.
But armoring really just means protecting yourself unduly, perhaps, with uh, creating extra tension in your body. And a- so, I mean, that's the kind of thing, of course, that the Alexander technique is well known for being able to help with. But from what you know, I am kind of curious, has the degree of of the sort of medically diagnosed symptom itself changed from over this period.
Yes, I mean it is an interesting situation in that the fusion that was shown in the X-rays that originally had been, let's say diagnosed with, was looked at again a few years later and it was non-existent. So it's an interesting one, and they changed the diagnosis from what's called ankylosing spondylitis to something now called undifferentiated spondylitis.
Hmm.
They can't quite describe how that happened, and I'm certainly pleased that it did happen.
Right.
And furthermore, I've gotten myself into kind of a new way of using my body in which I very rarely feel any kind of pain at all related to back pain or neck pain,
Hmm.
relative to what I used to feel. Maybe once or twice a year I'll feel some sharp, more acute pain, usually based on something that I myself know I've done to exacerbate the pain, so, like lifting something very heavy in the wrong way, or something that seems to be related to the use of my body.
Right. Right.
So that's the first piece. And then the second piece, Robert, what you mentioned, which is very, very accurate, is that people with spondylitis can relate to this in the fact that they feel as if they don't body armor or increase their muscle tension near where the pain may be. So, for instance, if you have pain in your shoulder, you would kind of tighten your neck or tighten around your shoulder and arm to try to make sure that you didn't exacerbate the pain. That's really the way that sort of your body naturally goes about trying to alleviate the pain. That's the exact wrong route to take. What you want to do is let go in those destinations in your body where you're body armoring,
Hmm.
and you may increase range of motion, and you will decrease pain. It's sort of a domino effect. You keep increasing the body armoring and the muscle tension in your body, and it seems to cause more and more havoc. Whereas the Alexander technique sort of teaches a new method of using your body where you decrease muscular tension, you subtract the pain in your body, or the muscle tension in your body.
Right. And I think we need to make it really clear to anyone listening that the Alexander technique is not a therapy. It's
Correct.
not a medical procedure. We don't. The Alexander practitioners we're called teachers, and what we do is teach. We show people some different possibilities of organizing themselves for movement, and from that can come things like less pain or discomfort, more efficient movement. But it also sounds a little bit like maybe some of the the measured symptoms that caused you to be diagnosed one way were maybe in part a reflection of how you had reacted to them in the first place. Do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, it's a
That you
chicken before the
yourself
egg thing. Yeah,
inadvertently may have, what can we say, enhanced the disease process.
potentially. I
Potentially. I
mean,
mean, this we're speculating here, but I
exactly.
think it is kind of interesting that the diagnosis changed quite dramatically after a few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's a hypothetical. It's hard to say
Yeah.
if it's chicken before the egg type of thing.
Right.
What I do know about what the diagnosis, from talking to a number of folks and reading, there's a wonderful book called Ankylosing Spondylitis by Mohammed Khan, who's sort of the foremost expert on the subject. And reading a lot about it, seeing a lot of medical professionals to try to learn more about how I can treat it. It's an autoimmune condition, so your immune system sort of kicks up extra inflammation where it doesn't need to.
Hmm.
I don't know how much control you can have over that. However, what you can control is your reaction to that inflammation.
Yes.
And the reaction to the inflammation should not be to body armor or increase stiffness or muscle tension to try to prevent more pain.
Because that doesn't
That's
work.
right. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and
it
and
does
that's
do, I
yeah,
guess, I mean, to be fair, what it can do is kind of the temporarily block the transmission mechanism of the pain, perhaps, for a brief period of time.
Maybe.
But it ultimately it's likely to perhaps lead to more pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those interesting things, and I think, for those of you out there that are listening and just listening who have back pain and aren't familiar with this exact situation, spondylitis, if you ever get a back spasm, you probably have felt a similar kind of need in yourself to make sure that you stiffen up or increase the tension around where you have the acute pain, for fear that if you release and let go in that particular area and move a little bit too much, you'll get more pain. And so definitely there is probably some use for this at the most acute levels when you go into spasm, your body sort of bracing against and limiting the amount of movement. However, once you, let's say, use ice or some other kind of remedy to try to neutralize the pain, at that point when you go into recovery, you do need to begin to move around a bit, and particularly inside your body, you need to send the signal or message to yourself to release and let go in that particular area, and not to continually hold on so tight, because
Right.
other parts of your body compensate, and then it has this domino effect where you begin to become distorted in your overall body use.
And there's also the issue that where you perceive the pain to be may not be the where what's happening is causing the pain.
Correct.
That's another sort of another layer of complication. Um, Maybe it would be helpful for our listeners um, who have spondylitis to just say very briefly, like if someone who has that condition comes to an Alexander technique teacher such as yourself for lessons, maybe you could just spend a minute or two talking about what they might expect to have happen.
Well, it sort of is tailor made for a spondylitis sufferer. I mean, me, when I first went to a lesson, I was hoping just to relieve pain, and, hoping to find something with the Alexander technique based on what I read about it to, increase movement in my body, to have better alignment. There's a lot of talk about the Alexander technique helping with posture. So these are all things that rang true to my particular situation. So what you do when you go to an Alexander teacher is they work with you specifically on usually two different parts of the overall lesson. One is in a chair and the other one's in a table. And there's usually some time spent walking around or doing everyday movements such as squatting, bending, breathing, etc. But really, the Alexander teacher will spend time looking at you as you move through space, specifically the sitting motion, which is a kind of a squatting type of motion, and see how you articulate at your joints, and see if there is excess muscle tension that you bring into that specific movement. It sounds like a simple movement, but we spend most of our lives sitting up to 14 hours a day. So learning how you sit and learning how you stand are two really important parts of everyday living that a sufferer should need to learn how to do better. That's the first part. The second part typically will be in a table where the Alexander teacher will move your body in different ways in which they're encouraging you to understand how your body works, how it moves, how it articulates at the joints, and basically seeing where you may be holding pressure, strain, or tension in your body, and helping you let go of that tension.
Hmm.
And so, it feels great at the end of a lesson. You feel lighter. You feel, at least in my particular case, I felt less pain. But more importantly, you walk away with really a method for you to use yourself differently. And that, for a spondylitis sufferer, is a wonderful tool to take into their lives.
And I assume that the table work you described, typically the student is lying on the with their back on the table, but in a very specific configuration. That is, their knees are elevated, and there's usually relative to their hips, and there's usually some support under their head. And I assume that
Correct.
you encourage your students to do that on their own, right?
Yes,
It's an
absolutely.
incredibly powerful self-help process that, in fact, can be beneficial to anybody, um, whether they're taking Alexander lessons or not. It's kind of interesting, that process. It goes under different names, sometimes constructive rest,
Yep.
sometimes the Alexander lying down position. It's sometimes called active rest. There are a couple of other names for it. Has been getting a lot of buzz on the web lately as a self-help tool that anyone can use, and I would think that someone with spondylitis would would be particularly likely to derive some benefits from that, because it really helps you to learn to release tension in a situation where it's pretty obvious that no tension is needed. And it also kind of conspires to undo that pressure that sitting and standing tend to create over the course of a day.
Absolutely, Robert.
So,
That's a perfect definition. I mean, what's so interesting about, I've heard it referred to again, a lot of those things, constructive rest, probably most commonly, is that in that semi-supine position, where you're treating yourself essentially on the ground,
mhm,
you are in some effect doing what people do when they meditate in a sitting position,
mhm,
but there's
mhm,
less load on your spine because you're able to lay down
mhm,
flat on the floor. So, as opposed to being prescribed exercises or given specific stretches or postures, the Alexander technique, from a self-care standpoint, has this wonderful technique which is called the constructive rest, where you really lay down and then go deep into your own body. And I call it like an MRI or a CAT scan of yourself, where you kind of look, where am I holding tension or pressures inside my own body, and how can I let go of those tensions and pressures. And it really gets you connected, from a mind-body standpoint, to understand, where your habits of holding tension are. The lessons are wonderful in that it sort of teaches you where those things may be going on, where those distortions might be happening, where that tension might be manifesting itself in your body. So they are very effective.
right. Um, Matt, is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to mention before we end the podcast?
Absolutely. I think the my one last thing I would say for people that do have this condition, and just people who have back pain in general, because it can be very debilitating in their lives, is that at the end of the day, there are certain things that may help. For instance, massage or physical therapy or chiropractic, and certain medications may help alleviate pain. So I think it's important to explore all of these different modalities as you get deeper into understanding how you can sort of treat yourself. The key thing with the Alexander technique that's special and unique is you will come out of the Alexander technique lesson or lessons with some tools you can really use on your own. And those tools will be long lasting in your ability to sort of affect change in your own body. So it's certainly recommended. Highly. It changed my life, and also led me to becoming an Alexander teacher. So I believe in it wholeheartedly.
And I would add to that, I have interviewed a number of people who've studied the Alexander technique, and as a result, or came to it as a result of chronic illnesses of various kinds, Parkinson's and a whole variety of them. And one thing that pretty much everyone has, all those people have in common, is that they say the thing about the Alexander technique, one of the things that really distinguishes it from everything else that they tend to have been exposed to, is that it's an extremely empowering process. It shows you how you can make changes in yourself, and that really is something that sets it apart from a lot of other things.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So maybe on that note, this would be a good time to bring our conversation to a close. My guest today has been Matt Pressman, an Alexander Technique teacher in Delray Beach, Florida. And if anything that we've been talking about intrigues you, and certainly if you live in Delray Beach, and what's the name of that county that it's in?
Palm Beach County.
Palm Beach County.
Sure.
Get hold of Matt. We'll put a link to his site by the interview. And if you live anywhere else in the world, we'll put a link to a site where you can find a teacher in your area. Matt, thanks so much for being on the show.
Robert, thanks. It's been a pleasure.